Hello everyone, today we're going to build a to-do application in ReactJs and TailwindCSS. So a showcase of what we're going to be building. On my right I have my to-do app, and on my left I have this. We have a title and then a simple form with an input where we're going to be typing in our to-do list, our to-do items. And then once we submit the form, then it's going to have a drop-down list that is going to list everything that we type in. So for the showcase, I'm just going to say something like subscribe to the channel. And as you can see, we have subscribe to the channel, which is added, and it says 1 items left. And we can clear list or we can delete the item. And we can just add a bunch of gibberish to show you how this works. And every time that we add an item, then it is added to the count, and then it is also listed. So if I add another item, it will say 10 items left, and I can clear the entire list like so, or I can decide to delete each one of them individually like so. And notice how if I try to submit an empty input, then it shows me an alert that says input is empty. And then one other thing is that if I try to reload this, then you'll notice that our to-do list is still going to be available. And that is possible because if you go into our local storage, right, then we have items listed here, and we have our to-do list listed, and it is stored in local storage, such that even if I were to stop my development server right now, because this is on localhost 3000, and reload it, then my to-do list would still be available. And just to show you what I mean, if I reload this, then this will still remain. So it is looking fantastic. So let's get to building. The first thing that I want to do is I just want to open my terminal, and actually I've already done that. So the first thing that you'd want to do is open your terminal and run npx create react app, and then give the name of your application. So this command right here, and I've called mine to-do app-2. And then once it finishes, then I'm just going to say code into to-do-app-2, which will open up Visual Studio Code into that folder. And then I can close this terminal. And then what I'm going to do is I just need this image. So this is the image that I'm going to be working with, and you can use any other image that you want. I just added some slight bit of editing to add the linear background gradient from purple to light blue. And I'm just going to copy this. And then inside here, inside my source, inside here, I'm just going to paste it in and then place this full screen. Okay. And then once we do that, because I want to also install TailwindCSS, what I'm going to do is just open up Google Chrome, and then I'm going to go into TailwindCSS docs/installation. Okay. And then I'm going to go to React app, and then I'm going to proceed to install TailwindCSS. So I'm going to copy this, and inside my terminal, just paste this in and let this run. Okay, and once this finishes running, then I'm going to go ahead and install Krakow. So just copy this and paste it inside here as well. Okay, and then once this finishes running, once again, I'm going to go back into my installation documents, and then just copy this and go into package.json, and then I'm going to paste it inside here. So we're going to be replacing our start, build, and test scripts to always use create react app configuration override. Okay, and then we need to create this file. So just copy this, and then inside the root of our application, I'm just going to create krakow.config.js like so, and then just paste this in. And then next we need to run this. We create our TailwindCSS config file. So paste this in and run it, and it will create tailwind config.js like so. And then inside here, we're only going to replace this first line, and we're going to replace it with this. So just copy this and paste it inside here like so. And then we can go ahead and grab this, and inside index.css, just at the top, we can just paste this in, and then remove this, of course, and remove this and this. There we go. Okay, so that's looking fantastic, and I think that is going to be it. So let me just open a new tab here, place this to the right, and then place this to the left. Okay, so that now once we have this, I want to install two more dependencies, and I'm going to say npm install react icons dash dash save, and react icons is for our delete icon. Okay, and then I'm also going to install uuid, and I'm going to explain why we need it. Okay, so this is finished running, and I'm going to do some bit of cleanup in my app.js, and I'm going to delete everything inside this header. I'm going to delete everything and then return an empty fragment inside here with an h1 that says ToDo. Yeah, ToDo, just like that. And then I'm going to remove these two imports at the top and transform this into an arrow function because I like arrow functions. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to save this, and now I'm going to spin up my development server by saying npm start. So once that spins up, you can see we have ToDo on the right, which is coming from this, so everything is working correctly. And let me close this tab and these two config files and the package JSON. And what I'm going to do is inside my source, I'm going to create a new folder called components, and components is going to have list.js, and then another component we're going to create is logo.js, and then the final one is going to be hero.js, which is going to contain our image. And once again, like I said, I'm going to use this image for my for this tutorial, but you can use any image that you want. You can tweak it out and add some more styling if you want. So once I do that, then I'm going to go inside list.js and just say underscore array_fce, like so, and I can do this using an extension called ES7 React Redux GraphQL and React Native Snippets. So you can install this, and then you'll be able to do a bunch of commands which you can go through right here. Okay, I'm not going to go through that now. So once I say underscore array_fce inside here, then it will generate this boilerplate for me. And for now, what I just want to render is an h2 that says list component, like so. Let me give it a bit of styling, because if you have worked with Tailwind, then you can see that there's an h1, but it resets a lot of the styling. So I'm going to say this should be font bold and text for XL, just so that we can see it when we render it on the screen. And then I'm going to go inside logo.js, and once again I'm going to say underscore array_fce, and then inside logo I'm going to return an empty fragment once again, and then I'm going to be returning a header, right? A header, and this header is going to be an h1 that says ToDo. Okay, so we are removing this from my app.js right here. So I'm removing it from here and placing it into my logo component, and then just save that. And then in hero I'm going to say underscore array_fce, but then inside here I want to import my image, so I'm going to say import hero from / should be ToDo hero.jpg. I think that's what I call the image. Yep, that's the name of the image right there. And then inside here I'm going to return a fragment once again, and then I'm going to be returning a section, and this section is going to say just the image, actually, right? Just the image should be enough. And then this image I'm going to reference it from hero, and let me just save this so that I see what I have on the screen. Now inside my app.js, what I'm going to do is delete this, and I'm going to be returning a main element. Okay, so the main element, and then we're going to say first render out our logo. I want to see the logo first, so let me save this. Let's see what happens. Logo is not defined, of course. I forgot to import it, sorry for that. So import logo at the top right there, and we should save it, and we should see ToDo. Just reload this. It does that sometimes, so you can just reload it, and we should see ToDo. Okay, and then below the logo I want to render my hero, so let me say render my hero component, import it as well, like so. Move this downwards so that we should see our image right there. Okay, so that's looking nice. That's looking nice. Now once we have both of these, then what I want to do is, obviously you can see that this image is quite big. First of all, I want to position this image absolute so that it goes behind this text. And what I'm going to do is inside my hero I'm going to give this section a class name of hero, like so. And then I'm going to go inside index.css. Right below this I'm going to say target the hero, and I'm going to say position this as absolute, and then position to the top of 0. And what happens here is that once I save this, I've not saved it yet, but once I save it, then it will go to the top right there, but it will go behind this. It will go, sorry, on top of this, but I want it to go behind it. So I can do that by just setting the z index to a negative number. So any negative number that you want here, let me just say negative 999, and then save this and reload this, and it should go behind the text, and you should see ToDo on top of the image. Okay, there we go. So we have ToDo showing on top of the image, and that is what we want. So once we have that, I'm going to place this back to the side, and we need to add a few more things, right? We need to add a few more things. As you can see, I don't want the image dancing all over the place. So what I'm going to do is right below this, I'm going to target the hero and the image inside the hero, and I'm going to give this a height of 300 pixels, like so. And let's say width should be 100%. Okay, so let me see what happens if I do that. Okay, so let's try to increase the size of this, and look at that. So we have the image always takes up 300 pixels, and then what was it? The width is always going to be 100% of whatever device that we are viewing it on. So this looks nice. This looks okay. So let me place it back to the side. And then let's go inside logo and let's tell this out a bit better. So let me give this a class name of, let's say, flex item center and justify to the center, like so. And then let's go inside this ToDo, give this a class name, inside the H1, give this a class name of text-2xl and text-white and margin top of 10. Move it downwards, and then let's say font bold, and let's transform it to uppercase, like so. Let's add some letter spacing. How do you add letter spacing in Tailwind? What's the name of the class? Tracking. Let's say tracking widest. To add some bit of letter spacing right there. And then now once we have this, then let's create our form next. Let me see. Actually, for bigger screens, let me push it downwards just a bit. And where is it? Right there. Okay, so let me say that for large screens, I want the margin top to be 20. Push it downwards, just a bit downwards, and probably increase the size of it as well. So let me say that for large screens, let's say text for XL, just make it a bit bigger. And then let's create our form next. So I'm going to go back inside my app.js, and right below this, then I want to create my form, and it's not going to have an action. And then inside this form, I'm going to have an input with a type of text and a name of text, like so, with a placeholder. Placeholder is going to say enter your ToDo item, like so. And I think that's going to be it for the input, actually, so that we're going to have this on the screen. And let's style it out just a bit better. Let's give this a class name of flex item center and justify center. Move it to the center, and then let's say margin top of 10, push it downwards. Okay, and then let's go inside the input, give this input a class name of padding on the y of 2, padding on the x of 5. Okay, and then say rounded dash large, rounded large. Okay, let's say background gray, so bg gray of 700. We're going to have that looking amazing. Okay, and then notice how when I click this, it creates a drop down list of the items that I've already filled in, right? I don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another attribute here that is called autocomplete, and set this to off. And what this does is that it doesn't allow the form to be auto completed, so that now I can just click on it and then I can add my own items inside. And then the next thing that I want to do actually is just change the text of this. So let me go back inside here and say text dash white, change it to white text. Let's also add some letter spacing here, so tracking widest. Let's see how this would look. Tracking, let's say tracking wide. That's a bit of letter spacing, and this is actually almost negligible, but that's okay. And then the next thing that we need to do is I want to set up our state values that will control what that we will use to turn this form into a control form in React. So at the top, I'm going to import use state from React, like so. And then below this, I'm going to create two state values. So I'm going to say the first one is going to be const text and set text, and this is going to be equal to use state, and by default it's going to be an empty string because this is what technically we are mimicking the input that we have right inside there. And then the second one is going to be items and set items. This is going to be equal to use state, and it by default is going to be an empty array. And the reason why we need this is because this is what we're going to use to populate our to-do list. So every time we add a new to-do list item, then it's going to be passed into the items state value, which is an array. Okay, now how do we turn this into a controlled input? Very simple. So we can just go below this. Actually, let me go after the autocomplete, and then we need to add a value to this, and the value is going to be the text. Remember that the value for this, I'm setting it to the text because the text is an empty string, and by default we have an empty string inside here. Now let me show you something that you might encounter, and probably you it might just be annoying just a bit. Okay, so I've added the value here and I've just saved it, but notice if I try to type inside this, then nothing happens. Okay, nothing happens, and let me show you why. There's an error in the console. If you've ever dealt with forms in React, that says you provided a value prop to a form field without an onChange handler. So it's because we haven't passed in this onChange handler. That's why we cannot type this inside this input, because by default now this input is now turned into a read only input. Okay, so let's fix that by adding onChange, right? And then we're going to pass in our inline function, and inside here we're going to be targeting that synthetic event of e, and then we're going to say set text into e.target.value. And what this does is that it just grabs everything that we type inside here. So once it grabs everything that we type, then it's going to change to set the value that it gets from inside here into the text, which will now populate this state value from an empty string to whatever we type in. So that when I save this, then now look at that, so we can type inside it, looking fantastic. Now the next thing that we need to do is actually, you know what, let me just render our list component. So I'm going to go below the form and then render out list like so that we should see list component right there. Okay, looking fantastic. Well, not really fantastic, but you know, you get the drift. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is handle how this form submits, because by default, notice how I can type inside here, but if I submit it by pressing enter, then our app reloads. Okay, our app reloads, and then whatever you type in is passed into the address bar, which I don't want to happen. Okay, look at that, just to show you. I don't want this to happen. I don't want the reloading to happen. So what we're going to do is on the form, because this form we're not going to have a submit button. So for this form, I'm going to say on submit, and I'm just going to say the function that we're going to create is going to be called handle submit. Okay, and before you save this, you're going to get an error. So before you save this, let's just create the function, and I'm going to say const handle submit, and once again we're going to be targeting the event like so, and I'm going to say e.prevent default like so. So now when I try to okay, it does that sometimes, you can just reload it. So now once I try to submit it, then nothing happens. You can see there's no reloading effect. Okay, now the next thing that we need to do is I want to create an object where we're going to be passing in everything that is typed inside here, and we're going to be populating this state value, right? So right below this, I'm going to say const new item or new items, and this is going to be equal to an object, right? And the object, the first one, we're going to be targeting the ID. We're going to be creating an ID, and this ID is going to be coming from UUID v4, okay, which we have not imported. So let's do that. Right below this, I'm going to say import v4 as UUID v4 from UUID. Okay, that's how the documentation of UUID says to import it. And then now the reason why we need this unique IDs is because every time we add a new to-do list or a new to-do item rather, a unique ID is always going to be generated for each item that we add in our to-do list. And that is very important, because when we are deleting the items, we don't want to accidentally delete everything in our to-do list, right? And then once you generate the ID, I'm going to add another key here called title, and the title is going to be equal to the text that we type inside our input. Okay, so I'm going to save this. Sorry, before I save that, what I'm going to do is right below this, I'm going to say set items, because now we need to populate these state values. So I'm going to say set items, and I'm passing in my brackets and then my array, and I'm going to say set it to new items like so. And then if there are already items in our to-do list, then I also want to pass in those items, right? Because what this will do is that every time, if I only have this for set items, then every time that I add a new item, then it is going to be deleted and only that new item is going to be passed in, which I don't want. But I want to grab everything else that is already in the items, right? If I already have items, that is. So I can do that by adding what in JavaScript is called a spread operator. So I'm going to say dot 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 items like so. So this is the spread operator, which means just grab everything that is already in the items array. If there are any, then it's going to add them in, and if there are none, then it's just going to return an empty array, and then also pass in the set items. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and this, if I try to submit it, then nothing happens. But if you have an extension called React Developer Tools, what you can do is you can just click on F12, and then you can go into components right there, and for the app, that's where our state is managed. You can see that my input is currently filled with all this gibberish, right, which is currently our state. But let me reload this so that we have a much clearer view. Okay, so our two state values, the first one is an empty string right there, which comes from this. Okay, and then the second one is an empty array, which comes from this right there. Now if I try to type everything inside here, if I try to type anything, then it's going to populate our state value for the string, which we have ensured by adding the value here and the unchanged right there. And then once I submit it, look at this, now it is no longer an empty array, now it is an object. And look at that, we have an ID, which is a unique ID, and then we have the title, which is everything that is typed inside the input. So the next thing that we actually need to do is grab everything from here, grab what is typed in and render it down inside here. But one more thing that I do want to add is that every time I submit the form, then I want to change this input back to an empty string. So right at the top, right below this, I'm going to say set text back to an empty string. When I submit this, then it's going to go back into an empty string. I think that is a much better user experience. Now, how do we render all our to-do items? That's very simple. Remember how we rendered our list right here? What we can do is, because the items array here is what technically holds our to-do list, then I can pass in the items as a prop. So I'm going to call a prop called items, and I'm going to pass in my item state value like so. And then inside my list, because this is a list component, I can go inside here and I can just destructure the items, right? And now instead of rendering all this, and I can remove these class names. So instead of rendering an h2, what I want to render is now an article, right? And then this article is going to say, first of all, let me get an unordered list. And then inside here, I'm going to say items.map, place my brackets like so, and I want to destructure it immediately because I know I only want to destructure the ID and the title. So I'm going to say ID and title, and then set an implicit return with a bracket like so. And then inside here, I'm going to say list item. So I'm going to be returning a list item with the key of ID like so. And then the text is going to say the title. Now, once I save this, look what happens. We have all this because this is what we have been entering inside our input all that time. Okay, so this is looking nice. Now let's style this a bit better. So for the class name, I just want to say bg gray-700, same as the input. Okay, let's say margin on the x-axis of 5. Okay, let's say padding of 5 all around. Okay, and then let's go inside this list item. And actually, you know what, I'm doing something wrong. Instead of doing this here, let me remove it from here. Oops, really? Let me remove it from here and place it on this UL like so, so that this will technically still be the same. Let's add a rounded border, so rounded dash large, and then let's say margin top of 5, or rather let's say margin top of 10, pushed away from this from our input. And then let's go inside this list item, give this a class name of text white and margin on the Y, or rather padding on the Y of 2. Separate them out from one another just like that. And then let's say tracking wider, just to make it separate the text just a bit. And look at that, we have all of this. Now, because we are not rendering an ordered list, instead we're rendering an unordered list, I want to have some kind of separation between each one of them, right? So below this, rather than below, inside this class name, I'm going to add a border, right? A border on the button, and I'm going to say border dash gray dash, let's say 800. Let's see. Nope, let's say 600 to make it just a bit lighter, so that we're going to have this, right? Why do we have this space? This space is because of this padding right here. Okay, let me see. Let's add padding on the X of here, of 5, sorry, so that the lines will always go to the end, right? The lines always go to the end. And what else? Let me add this padding on the Y to 3, make it just a bit bigger. And then notice how, I don't know whether you can see it, but on the bottom, right, I try to zoom in, on the bottom right here, there's also a border on the bottom, right? I don't want this to happen. Because this is just a bad UI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a a custom class of list, or rather ToDo dash list, like so. And then I'm going to go inside my index.css and target the ToDo dash list. And I'm going to be targeting the last child, so I'm going to place my colon and say last child, and I'm going to say border bottom, set this to none, so that the last item on the to-do list is never going to have a border on the bottom, which will remove this. Okay, so let's reload this. Okay, and then let's add some items, and look at that. Now we no longer have items, we no longer have a border on the bottom. Now the next thing that we need to do is just add our X icon, which is going to be our delete button, right? Now what I'm going to do is, because we can't really return more than one element from any single return in React, then I'm going to grab this, and actually let me show you what I mean. If I try to render a button here, I get an error. Okay, that's the reason. That's because I'm trying to return more than one element in a single return. So I'm going to grab all of this and pass in a fragment like so, and then paste this in, so that now we're going to have a button, and this button is just going to say delete. Okay, delete for now. But and actually, you know, let me just get the icon right away. I've forgotten the name of the icon, so let's go to React icons and let's search for close. Okay, and I want an icon called IO close, so this icon right here. Okay, and then I'm going to just render it inside here, and remember it's a React component, so it needs those two angle brackets, and then import it at the top. So I'm going to say import this from react-icons/io, and then now we should have our delete icon. Okay, this is IO5. This is IO5, sorry. So that now we are going to have our delete icon showing our X icon right there. Okay, and we don't, obviously we don't want it to be here. Instead we want it to be on the right. So what we can do is, inside here, inside this fragment, I can render another UL. Okay, and then give this a class name of flex. Okay, and then items-center and justify-between, which will take this to the end. And then now obviously I don't want the border to be on the list items, so I'm going to just grab this, the border here, and then paste it inside here. Let's save this, so that we should have this, right? And then now, instead of the padding on the X here, actually, you know what, let me cut it out from here. Let me paste it inside here. Let me see what happens. Padding on the X of 5. Okay, there we go. Because I just didn't want the borders to move inside. So once we have this, then we can style this button a bit further. So I'm going to go inside this button, give this a class name of text dash, let's say large, make it just a bit bigger, let's say XL. Okay, and then inside here give this a class name of text dash red dash 400, make it red in color so that we have this for the text. Look at that. Okay, that's looking amazing. Now let's add something at the bottom, just at the bottom after where was it after this? Yes, after this I'm going to render another UL with 2 list items, and the first list item is going to have a paragraph. Come on, it's going to have a paragraph. Really doesn't want to type. And this paragraph is going to be the number of items left, right? So I'm going wait a minute, there's still a border below this. I'm going to fix that. And this one is going to say items dot length, and it's just going to say items left. So the number of items left, and we have 7 items left. Style this out. So let's give this a class name of text dash small, text dash gray dash 600. Sorry, 400. Make it just a bit lighter so it's more readable. And then go inside this UL, give this a class name of padding on the X of 5. Let's look at that. And padding on the Y of 3. Separate it so that we have that. And then what else can we do? We can do something like we have a button here. We should have a button here, and this button is going to say what? Clear all, or rather clear list. So we have clear list right there, and give this button probably the same class name as this. So just copy this and paste it inside here. Okay, and then go inside this UL and turn this into a flex box. So flex. Okay, and then items dash center. Okay, and then justify between, like so that this will now go to the end, and this has an N at the end, between, like so that we have clear list right there, and we have 7 items left. So that's looking okay. Now let's add the functionality to this button, right? And this is very simple. Inside our list component, we can add another prop, and the prop that we want is the set items right here, right? The set items function, which is we are going to use to turn the state back to an empty array. So I can call a prop set items and set this equal to set items like that, and go back inside my list and destructure it by saying set items here. And then on the button to clear list, I can add an on click, and I'm going to say pass in my inline function like so, and say set items back to an empty array. And then once I click on this, then we can clear the list. And once I add the items, once again I can clear the list. So the next thing that we need to work on actually is our delete items, right? On our delete items. Now we can delete the items very simply. I'm going to go back into app.js, and right below this function, I'm going to create another function called const delete item. And then I'm going to be targeting the unique ID for each one of them. Remember why we had this ID. The reason why we have this ID once again is that so that we can target each one of them individually when we're deleting them. Because if we did not have a unique ID, then we would accidentally delete our entire to-do list, which is not a functionality that we want. So inside here, I'm going to just say set items, and I'm going to say items.filter. And then for every item, then I want to say item.id not equal to the ID. And what this does is that it will filter over every item in our to-do list, and it's going to be checking for the ID, the item.id, and then it's going to be returning every other ID that is not equal to the ID that we have clicked on. So if we click on this, it's only going to delete this, and then it's going to return everything else. So that's what this does. Okay, that's what this does. And then once again, we can pass this in as a prop. So right inside here, we can say delete item, like so. Set it to delete item. Wonderful. And then let's go back into list.js. Once again at the top, say delete item, destructure it. And then on the bottom where we have this right here, I'm going to add the button, and I'm going to say on click. Then I want to pass in my inline function once again, and I'm going to say delete item by the ID, like so. so that now once I save this, then I can click on this and it deletes the item, and I can click on this or on all of this, which would delete the items. So that's looking fantastic. Now, one thing that I did want to do actually is that if I have 0 items on the list, then I did not want this to render. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this entire article, right? I'm going to grab this entire article right there, just cut it out, okay? Don't backspace, cut it out. And I'm going to say, place my brackets, and I'm going to say items dot length is not equal to 0. Then I want to render everything inside here, okay? So what this does is that it checks the items that we have in our to-do list, and if the items is not equal to 0, meaning if it is greater than 0, then I want to render my article, which is basically our to-do list. So I'm going to save this, and that disappears, and then once we add an item, then it appears, okay? And you can choose to add this or you can remove it. I think I'm just going to you know what, I think I'm going to remove it because I think it would look much better for me. So I'm going to have this so that we have 0 items left, and then every time that we add an item, then we can say it increases the value because our to-do list now has an item, okay? And we can clear list. Now what are we remaining with? The next thing that we can do is implement local storage, right? I think that is the only thing that we're remaining with. So I'm going to go back into app.js, and at the top I'm going to import another hook called use effect, right? And use effect, I'm going to use it below this delete function, and I'm going to call use effect like so. Set my callback function, and I'm going to say inside here, I'm going to say local storage. I've forgotten how local storage works. Let me get my cheat sheet. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to say where is it, local storage dot set item, and I want to set the item, and I'm going to call it items like so, and I'm going to say json dot stringify, and I'm going to be stringifying the items, which is items has an s, which is our state value, and then I'm going to add a dependency here, and it is going to be dependent on the items, so on the item state value right here. And this means that every time that the items change, then local storage is going to be updated with this, okay? So every time that you add a new item, then local storage gets updated. And just to show what this means, if I save this and I go to F12 once again, and I've just remembered I didn't limit this. If I click on F12 and go to application local storage, notice how we have items right here and it's set to an empty array currently. But if I try to add something inside here, look at that, now it's getting filled with everything that I'm adding, right? And you can confirm this right there. And this shows that we have actually accessed our local storage. But if I reload it, then local storage doesn't really save anything, and we need to fix that. And we can fix that by going back to the top right below this, and I'm going to create a function called get local storage like so, and I'm going to say let items equals to local storage dot get item, and we're getting the item of items, which we have just set it. Remember how we set it at the bottom right here? We set the item called items, and now we are getting the item called items right there. And then I'm going to say if items does exist, right? So if this exists, then I want to return json.pass, and I want to pass in the local storage dot get item, and I want to get the item of items like so. And then if it does not exist, then I just want to return an empty array like so. And then now we just need to call this function, and we're going to call this function inside our use state right here. So every time that we load our app, then this use state is going to call this function, and it's going to check for local storage, and if local storage exists, then it's going to render out our items, and if it doesn't, then it's just going to render out our empty array. So let's pass in the get local storage and invoke it like so, so that now when I add items to my list and reload it, then nothing happens because local storage exists, and we can see that it has 9 items left. Now, one thing that I do want to do is just limit this a bit. So let's go back into list.js. Let's go inside this UL right inside here and say that for small screens, then I want the max width to be XL, which will reduce this massively like so. And then I'm saying for small screens, then I just want the margin on the X to go back to auto, which will push it to the center. So that we have this, look at that. And just like that, we have our to-do list working correctly. And I think that is going to be the end of the video. Before you leave, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, then add this to your to-do list. Subscribe to the channel. Look at that, looking amazing. So thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next video.